Hi, and welcome to the New Moon Knitting Podcast. I'm Hillary, and this is episode 12. On today's podcast, I have 3 finished objects, I have updates on 4 whips, and at the end, I will share an update on my stash down journey. Since this is the first episode in February, I'll talk about what I finished in January and what my totals look like right now. So, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so today, let's start with what I'm wearing. My biggest project of like the last 6 months, I have finished my Eurus sweater by Eggio Knits. This is an all-over cabled sweater that is knit from side to side. So you start with the sleeve and you knit up the sleeve and then you knit across the body and then you knit the other sleeve. The pattern uses a US 10, which is a 6mm needle, and the recommended yarn is an Aran weight yarn. I used 2 yarns held together. This is Cascade 220 Heathers in the color Lepidolite Heather, and Yarn Jam Surrey Halo in the color Seashell. The pattern comes in 3 sizes. I knit the size 1, and the gauge for this is 16 stitches and 20 rows over 4 inches. I am so excited about how this came out. I will post some pictures up here of what the full thing looks like, but yeah, I think it came out so nice. So I made a couple of modifications. The body of mine is not as wide as the pattern calls for. I think the pattern has you knit like 22 centimeters before you do the split for the neckline, and I ended up only doing 15 on each side. So I was about 7 short on both sides, which is like 14 centimeters total, which is about 5.5 inches. So that's quite a bit of width that I took off of what the original pattern calls for. But I'm very happy I did that for 2 reasons. One, I ran out of yarn. And so if I had done it to the full length, I would have probably needed like another 2 balls of yarn. I'm very happy that I made that modification because I still have, I don't know, maybe like 8 or 10 inches, maybe 12 inches. I have still quite a bit of positive ease. And I think if I had that extra 5 inches, it just would have felt a little overwhelming for me personally, given kind of the style of the sweater that it's an Aran weight and it's got all over cabling. I think it would have just felt too big and too heavy if I had all that extra fabric. I also think too, let's see. So the sleeves as they are right now fall very nicely right at my wrist when my arm's up, and when my arms are down, it just barely like cascades over the top of the back of my palm. And that's a really good length, I think, for sleeves this size. I think if I had made the body wider because of the construction, the sleeves also would have been like 2 inches longer on each side. And I personally wouldn't want that much extra length in here because these are going to get so dirty if that's the case. If these are hanging over my hands, this is not going to ever stay clean. So I'm really happy I made that adjustment. But otherwise, I pretty much did what the pattern recommends. On the bottom, you do a split hem, and the pattern actually has instructions for doing some short row shaping on the back hem, so it sits a little bit longer than the front. I didn't do that. I think that's a very nice add-on feature, but I just decided for me, for the way that I wear this, it wasn't that important to me to have that additional length in the back. Keen-eyed observers will notice that my bottom hem is not the same color as the rest of my sweater. Like I mentioned, I ran out of yarn, so I fully ran out of the Lepidolite Heather when I was finishing up my neckband, and I was like, well, I could buy another skein, but it's not going to be the same dye lot, so I run the risk of it not matching anyway. Or I could see if I have something that's kind of close and, kind of really like play into this idea that I'm like trying to focus on using my stash before purchasing things. So I did have some yarn left over from when I made my wild wool trail socks last fall, and it is cesium yarn merino sock, and the color is called Creator of Beauty. And it is this similarly like purple family yarn. So I held that double with a strand of the Surrey, and yeah, if I kind of pull it up, like you can definitely tell, right? It's not the same color in the light. I don't think it's quite as obvious in person as it is on camera, but I'm okay with that because first of all, most of the time when I've already worn the sweater like 3 times, I can't get enough of it. And when I've worn it with like jeans or something like that, I like to French tuck my sweaters. So some of the hem in the front is not visible anyway because I have it tucked into a pair of jeans or something like that. And yeah, I think you can tell, but I don't think it looks bad. I just don't think it looks bad. And I'm happy that I tried to use what I had before purchasing more yarn. And if I really don't like it, if I really feel like it's taking away from like the total package of this amazing sweater I made, I can always buy another skein and I can redo the hem. But for now, I'm really happy with how it came out. Oh, it is so warm. That Surrey, the wool, the cables, all comes together, and like it has been so nice wearing it this January. We've had some really cold days. It's not too bad right now, but still, I love putting this on. It has like that oversized feeling, makes it just like so cozy. And I think I've always been, I'm not always drawn to like all over cables. I think they're fun to knit, but they're not always my style. They tend to lean like a little more traditional than I think like most of what I wear is. And so, yeah, I don't tend to do it, but I really think like making them horizontal instead of vertical really kind of gives it this like totally different feel. I think the color makes it feel like very fresh to me. And yeah, I think the color choices, the fact that I do have like quite a bit of, here, let me get my arm in so you can see. I have quite a bit of like marling because the Surrey is much lighter than the other yarn. It just softens the whole thing. The halo from the Surrey softens the whole thing. And it's just, I love wearing this so much. I'm so proud of this. This is like the best sweater I've ever made. And yeah, I'm really glad that I'm done and I have it to wear for the rest of this winter. So finally completed on the podcast, my Eurus sweater by Egyo Knits. All right, my next finished object are the Basic Bed Socks by Emily Boldon. These are a toe-up DK weight sock with alternating colored cuffs, heels, and toes. The pattern is written for US 4, which is a 3.5 millimeter needle, and a US 2.5, which is a 3 millimeter needle. I only ended up using a US 4. I did not switch the needle size for the cuffs because I wanted something that felt like a little looser and cozier for wearing a bed and things like that. The gauge is 24 stitches and 35 rows over 4 inches. The pattern comes in 3 sizes. I knit the first size, which is a European 36. And the pattern recommends a couple of different 8-ply yarns: wool organic merino, white gum wool 8-ply superfine merino, and milli post merino superfine merino 8-ply DK. I ended up using some yarn that I had in my stash, so I used Solitude Wool Icelandic in the color Charcoal Marl. And then for the heels and the toes, I held 2 strands of yarn together, the GGH Mohair Melange in the color Gray, and Cascade Eco Plus Hemp in the color Mocha. So this is how my socks came out. Upside down. There we go. So here they are. Yeah, I think they came out really cute. I really love The coloring on these, I think the marling and the Icelandic wool, and then this very subtle, soft kind of contrast with the heels and the toes is really nice. I've tried them on. They are super warm. I think they're going to be so nice again in the wintertime when it's cold. I mentioned this before, but these most likely will felt at some point, at least a little bit, because this Icelandic yarn on the band, it says it's very prone to felting, but that's okay because I think the longer I wear them, the more they felt, the more they'll just feel like slippers and less like socks, and that's not a bad thing. Someone did recommend maybe when I wash them, keeping them on sock blockers to like mitigate any shrinkage that might happen from the from using that, from the felting that might happen. I also did knit them a little bit longer than like I would a regular sock for my feet to try to also kind of anticipate a little bit of shrinkage if they start to felt a bit. But yeah, this was a nice basic sock pattern. You do I think it's a wrap and turn heel. I mentioned this. The heel is like slightly pointier than some other wrap and turn heels that I've done, but it fits fine. It's nice to wear. And it's free. I didn't mention that this is a free DK sock pattern. So yeah, I would highly recommend. Nice, easy project and a great pair of socks for like a cold winter day. So yeah, these are the basic bed socks pattern by Emily Boldwan. All right, up next, I have the Shine On hat by Martin Up North. This is a fun little DK weight hat pattern with all over color work, and it's free. I have already talked about this in a podcast. I shared about this last week in my episode about all about knitting for charity, but I thought I would bring it to the regular podcast as well in case anybody didn't tune into that video. So this pattern calls for a couple of different needle sizes. It is knit on DK weight yarn. The recommended yarn is Spitz Merino Soft, and the way that you size it, you use different needle sizes rather than different stitch counts. So from a US 4, which is a 3.5 millimeter, up to a US 8, which is a 5 millimeter needle. Depending on which size, you'll use a different needle size. So that's just something to keep in mind because obviously like your tension may be different if you're knitting DK weight yarn on a US 4 versus a US 8. And so if you know that you have like gauge issues or you have tension issues if you knit color work too tight or too loose, maybe this isn't the right hat for every size for you, but you certainly can definitely find a size in here that would work, and then hopefully you can give it to someone you care about or wear it yourself depending on what size that is. I knit the first size, which is knit on a US 4, which is a 3.5, and a US 6, which is a 4 millimeter needle. And I used Lion Brand Respun in the colors Denim and Parchment. All right, so this is the final hat. You can see it has these really lovely like floral little designs. It reminds me a lot of like a wallpaper, like antique wallpaper, in the way that the pattern is written up. And then you do 4-point decreases along kind of the edges of some of the diamonds to create the crown shaping for this hat. The pattern, like I mentioned, is free on the designer's website, and that worked fine for me. That was the option I used. I will say the only thing was the resolution on the pattern, like the chart for the color work, was a little low. The resolution was just a little low. It didn't bother me. I could figure out where everything was when I opened the image in a new tab and zoomed in. But yeah, just something to consider. They do also have a PDF version available if you prefer it. It just costs a couple of dollars. It's not free, but yeah, both options I think would be great. Yeah, I really like how it came out. I think this will be part of my charity knits for the year, so this is great because it now means I have 2 out of the 12 items that I wanted to finish for charity done. So I'm very excited about that, and I do think this is like a very fun hat and it was a pretty quick project. It only took me a couple of days to knit up, so really like how this came out. One last time, this is the Shine On hat by Martin Up North. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to whips. So I have 4 whips with updates this week, and the first whip I have an update on is my Stella quilt cushion. This is an all-over garter stitch pillow with modular knitting that creates kind of like a patchwork quilt motif to it. The pattern is available for DK and Aran weight yarn. I am knitting the DK version. The recommended needle size is a US 6, which is a 4 millimeter. I used a US 5, which is a 3.75 millimeter, because that's how I got gauge. The pattern recommends a couple of different yarns. I ended up using Solitude Wool Icelandic in a couple of different like pinks and yellows. I also used a skein of Tidal yarns and some Cascade Eco Plus hemp. So last time, I need to weave in some ends on this for sure. Because now my little stitch marker is all, okay, there we go. So last time I had just finished this square that I have this little cactus stitch marker on. And so I had finished 2 rows, and since then I have finished 1 more row of the cushion. So 4 more squares, and it's starting to come together. I think you can really see now like how the colors are gonna look together and how everything's gonna line up. I will say, like, I can tell, like, some of my tension feels a little wonky. Like, for some reason, it feels like it's wider up at the top than the previous rows, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if it's just, like, it just seems like that because this edge is loose and the other edges are, sandwiched between additional stitches. But yeah, I'm hoping it doesn't, like, I'm hoping when I block it, when it stretches out a little bit, it lays nice and flat, because right now it bubbles a little bit in places, and I don't know, I think that just might be because of the fact that it's not all one yarn. I'm using some different yarns together, and so yeah, I think when it's blocked it will sit nicer, but yeah, one thing I noticed, and also, like, I think too, like, I don't know how nice and clean my little center point is. If you look at it, like, it seems like some of the squares overlap a bit more than the other ones, but I'm trying not to be too critical on myself. This is, like, definitely, I've never done modular knitting before. This is like a whole new type of pattern for me, and even though I've done a lot of garter stitch, like, it is like it's a brand new experience. And so I do love the way these colors look together. I think it's going to look so nice in my house, and I'm very excited. I've mentioned previously, I have an idea now for what I want to do on the back, so I'm very excited to try that out once I finish the front. It is February, and in the, I think it's just the general making community, but certainly within, like, the knitting and fiber arts community, there is the idea of Finish It February, where you put a focus on completing works that you have in progress. And I love that. And so I think my hope for Finish It February is to finish all of the whips that you see in this episode, including my Stella quilt cushion. So I have, like, a little less than 4 weeks to get through quite a bit of this. But I think now that this is out of the way, I have just, like, a lot more headspace to do some more projects. So, all right. So that is my Stella quilt cushion by Laura Penrose. All right, up next, I have an update on my KAL Pullover by Claire Jackson, who is also known as Perfectly Knotted. This is a top-down drop sleeve sweater with a brioche tuck sleeve detail. The pattern uses 2 needle sizes, a US 8, which is a 5 millimeter, and a US 7, which is a 4.5 millimeter needle. The gauge is 18 stitches and 24 rows over 4 inches. And the pattern recommends a couple of different Treehouse DK weight yarns. So Treehouse knits truffled cashmere, redwood worsted, and the Dove DK. So I am using Cascade 220 in the color Tiger Lily. And this is like the orangiest red you can find. And Oh, I love it so much. I have never been much of a red person, and I think it's because I don't like reds that lean more like blue. You know what I mean? Like Christmassy reds or anything like that. And so I've been trying to find like a poppy red, but like even more orange. And I think like this color is so nice. And it's like it's a really gloomy day here. And I feel like this color just like brightens everything up. So yeah, I really love this color, Tiger Lily. It's so pretty. The pattern comes in 11 sizes, and I am knitting size 4, and I made quite a little bit of progress on this. So last time I showed this off, I had just started. I basically was so sad because my turtleneck sweater by Naringaruk was not working, and so I quietly put that in a bag and let it go for a little bit, and then was like, I want something else on my needles, and so I cast on this sweater kind of impulsively. But I've made a lot of really good progress on it. So you start flat, and you knit your kind of short row shaping for the back of the neck flat, and then you join in the round at the front of the neck after you've done the short row shaping to complete the rest of the shoulder shaping on it. So then as you're working that shoulder shaping, you do this like one row of brioche stitches right along the top of the shoulder there. So that runs along the shoulder seam, which is just a nice little detail. My first time like doing brioche in a long time, so it was fun to like pick up that skill again. And then once you get to the length of the shoulders, you split again, and you do work the front and the back separately. So I have done the front piece for the under the sleeves, and then I'm about halfway through the back. So yeah, it's coming along. You know, it's just a lot of stockinette, but I really like the color. I'm excited to see what the fit is like. I don't do a lot of drop shoulder sweaters, and the couple I've done were actually bottom up. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see how this fits on me. But yeah, I'm loving the color, liking the pattern so far. Been a nice knit. And yeah, so that is all for this week on the KAL Pullover by Claire Jackson, or Perfectly Knotted. All right, and then to wrap up my whips this week, I have 2 pairs of socks on the needles. So the first pair of socks is just a vanilla pair of socks that I cast on because to basically to practice for another pair of socks. So earlier this winter, I was working on a pair of, I think they're called Little Check Socks by Summer Lee. And I really love that pattern, but I was struggling with my tension when working colorwork socks in Magic Loop. I could not get my tension right, and I was really disappointed with the way it looked. And so I realized I needed a different approach, and I was trying to figure out like what other needles I could use. And I have a set of 9-inch circulars, and in the video I said I've never really liked 9-inch circulars because they hurt my hands. I'm an English style knitter, and I feel like I put too much tension in my fingers when I do it. And so I didn't think that was an option, but I thought, well, maybe if I practice on my 9-inch circulars, I can get the hang of like how to hold them with enough tension that like I don't feel like I'm going to lose them, but also not feel like I'm squeezing them and like I'm not, you know, I'm just like too tight in my hands. So I cast on a pair of like my vanilla sock pattern, so that I could see what it was like. So this has no real pattern, but the yarn that I'm using is a Shoppel Wool Zauberball. This is a 75% wool and 25% polyamide yarn, and this color I believe is 2254. So it's this mix of like pinks and purples, kind of just like that fade into each other. So I made some pretty good progress since casting these on. Here we go. So I cast on 68 stitches for these, and I did 2x2 rib, I think for 20 rounds. And then I just I'm just doing regular stockinette in the round. Oh, I think This is so pretty the way that all the colors are kind of blending. I've never used a Zobber ball before, but yeah, I think this is so pretty the way the colors are working up. And I will say, with practice, this is getting a little easier. Still doesn't feel quite as nice as, to me, as like Magic Loop does. It doesn't feel quite as normal. I definitely still need to I'm holding it tighter than I would regular needles, but it's getting easier as I go, and it doesn't feel as daunting to make a colorwork sock with this now. So my plan is to knit a full pair with the 9-inch circulars I have. The other reason I wanted to try to do a full sock is I only have one set of 9-inch circulars. These are a US 1. I'll put on the screen what that is in millimeters, but these are a US 1, and I think for the pattern for the little check socks you need a 1.5 or a 2. You need 2 different needle sizes, and so before I was going to invest in a pair, I wanted to be sure that I'm okay knitting a full sock in them. So but yeah, so far so good. I think the colors are really pretty, and yeah, just like a nice little vanilla sock for on the go. So yeah, these are just my little vanilla socks on 9-inch circular needles. All right, and my last whip this week is another pair of socks. So these are a pair of socks for my mom. For Christmas, I made my mom a pair of the country socks, which were an alternative pattern that came with the wild wool trail socks. And she loves them. She messaged me and said, you know, I've already worn them so many times. I've had to wash them a couple of times. They've been so great in the cold. And so she'd really like another pair of socks. And so I cast on another pair for her. And the country socks are a ribbed sock with a strong heel. So I wanted to make her something similar, but I wanted to try a new pattern. So I found a pair of socks, and they're called the ribbed socks with strong heel. So title right on the nose for what I was looking for. And they are by Danielle Elsbeth. So they are a cuff down 2x2 ribbed sock with a strong heel construction. And a strong heel, if you're not familiar, is similar to a heel flap and gusset in sort of like the amount of space you create for the sock. But instead of having to split for that heel flap and then pick up for the gusset, you knit everything in the round and you do your gusset increases as you work in the round. The pattern recommends a couple of different fingering weight yarns, and it's knit on a US 2, which is a 2.75 millimeter needle. I am using a US 1.5, which I think is a 2.5 millimeter needle. And I picked it because I know a sock knit at 72 stitches on a 1.5 millimeter needle fits my mom's foot very well. So that's why I went down a needle size. And then I went up kind of like a size in the pattern for the foot, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'm using another Zobber ball that I picked up. This one I believe is 2248. It's just like these lovely dark colors, and I've just done a little bit of work on the cuff so far. So yeah, the pattern is written for like shorty socks, but I'm just gonna make the cuffs as long as I think my mom would like them. She said she wanted them a little bit longer if I made her another pair of socks, to make them a little longer than the ones I did at Christmas. So I'll probably knit these until they feel like the right length, but like a little bit longer than I would regularly do a sock. But yeah, not too much to talk about in the pattern here so far. I do like the soft kind of color fading that's going on in here. It's very subtle, but it looks very pretty, and I think it'll be a great winter sock. So yeah, that is the last whip of the week. These are the ribbed socks with strong heel by Danielle Elsbeth. So the last thing I have to talk about today is a stash update. So today is my first podcast in February, and going forward, what I'd like to do is give an update for how much yarn I worked through in the month prior in the first episode of the month. So today is the first episode in February, so we're going to take a look back at what I did in January. And actually, I haven't given an update on the channel on where my stash is since I did my winter knitting plans video in November. So for this one, I'm going to count everything I did in December and January. And then going forward, we'll do it on like a monthly update. So that's what we're going to talk about. All right. So since the last time I updated it, I have finished 6 items from Stash Yarn. The Cozy Toes socks that I made for my husband for Christmas. My Evros sweater. An Oslo hat that I knit for charity. A pair of Slow Morning DK socks for myself and another pair for my aunt. A pair of basic bed socks that I just showed off, and the Shine On hat, which I also showed off in this video. So 1 garment and quite a few accessories from my Stash Yarn in the last 2 months. I have, however, made 1 set of purchases. I purchased 4 skein/balls of yarn. 2 of them I've already shown you. So there is a upcycling, like craft consignment store near me, and it's in Alexandria, Virginia, so maybe like a 30-minute drive. And I was in Alexandria a couple of weeks ago getting coffee with some friends, and on the way home I was like, I really wanted to check out this consignment store. I believe it's called the Upcycle Creative Reuse Center if you're looking for it. And if I got that name wrong, I will put the real name on the screen right now. But I've been dying to go, and so I was in the neighborhood, so I had to check it out. And while I was there, they had some really nice yarns, and they were just like a really good price. And so I bought those 2 Zauber balls that I just showed you. I also bought this Universal Yarns Pace in the color. It's another sock yarn, and this color is called Bark. I've been really dying to make a pair of brown socks, like a brown and white pair of socks. So I got this. And I also got 1 skein of this Magpie Fibers solo fingering. So it's a single ply 100% superwash merino fingering wool, and this color is called Stag Bunny. I've been dying to try Magpie Fibers. They're like semi-local to me. I believe they're based out of Maryland, and I really wanted to go to their store, and like their yarns are so pretty. And I just, because I've been focused on Stash, like I haven't really explored all the options that they have. So I picked this up because I think they might be at the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival this year, or they're like, if I'm going out there, they're kind of in the neighborhood, so I can check them out. So I want to try this yarn, see how much I like it. And then if I want to buy like a bigger quantity of yarn from them in May when I go to the festival, I can do it there. So yeah, it was a really fun experience. I got a really good deal on some yarns that are like super nice. I don't feel too bad because 2 of them are already in projects. So they will probably be out of my stash by the end of February, the next time I give a total. But yeah, a little bit coming in, but a lot has come out in the last 2 months. And let me give you some total updates. So in the past 2 months, I have used a total of 3,175.95 yards, and I've used 1,153.85 grams. So I've gone through a lot of yarn. Obviously, most of it was in this sweater. This used 2 strands of yarn. It's cables. It uses a lot of yarn. So a lot of it went into this, but that is a great amount of yarn to use in 2 months. So I'm very excited about that. So right now my totals are, for my total yards, I have 33,282.66 yards, or 7,812.46 grams. Which means from the beginning, if you'll recall, I started this in October. In my November update, my total grams were down, but my yards were up because even though I had used a bunch of yarn, I had bought new yarn, and all of the yarn I had bought was like mostly like fingering and like lace weight. So there just was like a lot more yards coming in than there were grams going out, if that makes sense. But as of today, I am down 2,394.84 yards, or 1,591.14 grams. So that is great. That means like since October, I've gotten, if you're using kind of like the standard 100 grams for a skein, I've gotten almost 16 skeins out of my stash. So that's wonderful. Like I can feel like I'm moving in the right direction. I will say I did some reorganizing, and now I used to have 3 bins of yarn. I can fit everything into 2 bins now, so that's very exciting. I can definitely feel the progress. And right now I have 2 big projects on the needles. I have the full sweater that I'm working on, and I have my Stella quilt cushion. And once those are off the needles, hopefully as part of Finish It February, those should also like be a big chunk out of my stash in terms of grams and yards used. So very exciting to finally see some progress on this front. And yeah, I'm very happy with how it's going. I've liked everything I've made, and I like the way that the rules are working for me, where if I purchase something, I don't feel bad about it, but I'm just trying to be very conscious about what I use. So that's my stash update. And with that, that's all I have for today. So if you liked this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of what I'm doing, please go ahead and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.